Secular Hall has got a sort of proud tradition of welcoming people who've renounced religion. I think the most notable in the 19th century was a man called Joseph McCabe, or Father Joseph McCabe as he was known, because he was a Catholic, and he wrote a book called, I think, 10 or was it 19 years in a monastery, which is where he'd been before he became manager of this hall. And he then wrote a very pertinent book called The History of the Popes, which is somewhere on that bookshelf over there. So there was Father Joseph McCabe, and then we had a man called Chapman Cohen, born on Churchgate, as you might guess, came from a Jewish background. Honorary member of this society, became the National Secretary of the National Secular Society. And of course, in more recent years, we've had Marianne Namazi from the Council of Ex-Muslims. And then, was it last year, we had George Asquith from a former member of the Jehovah's Witnesses. And of course, we've had other members like former Sikhs and former Hindus. I won't mention our artifact there, but together where we can talk about the caste system. But we've never had a former Scientologist speak to me. So it's a great privilege to welcome tonight Alex, who's going to talk all about Scientology and probably answer questions at the end.
Okay, absolutely.
I'll sit round here so I can see you.
Thank you. My name is Alex Barnes-Ross, and according to the Church of Scientology, I am an anti-religious bigot and hate speech propagator who has been waging a personal vendetta for profit against the Church of Scientology since December 2022. That's a quote from my hate website, whoisalexbarnesross.org, which makes no secret of who's behind it. I'd like to preface today's talk with a statement that I want to make very, very clear. I don't have anything against anyone who chooses to follow L. Ron Hubbard's teachings or practice Scientology. We live in a free and mostly fair society, and I believe that people have the right to follow any faith, or no faith, as they choose, and I will defend people's right to do so. But there is a difference between beliefs and behaviours. And the problem I have with Scientology is their practice of forced abortions, familial disconnection, hard manual labour, physical beatings and intimidation, slave labour, and of course, their efforts to harass and silence critics and former members who have decided to speak out. These are behaviours that I consider to be very unchurch-like, and while Scientology's Office of Special Affairs will use the defence of free speech to justify the 10,000 attack tweets, hate websites and online harassment I have been the lucky recipient of, they are the first to use any excuse that they possibly can to censor and restrict the free speech of those it considers enemies. Now, Scientology will likely brand this talk anti-religious hate speech, but in doing so, they are admitting that these abusive practices I am against are intrinsically linked to their belief system, which only demonstrates why it is necessary for government and law enforcement to intervene on what is quite literally a deadly serious issue. But what exactly is Scientology, you may be thinking? If you ask any Scientologist, you will likely get the response that Kirstie Alley gave during her time on Celebrity Big Brother, when a fellow housemate asked her that exact question.
So you are a Scientologist, is that right?
Yes.
Right. Can you tell me what is it exactly? Because we see so much about it on the press, and there is so much controversy about it, and I just don't understand, because I don't know anyone who are Scientologist. What the religion consists of?
The best way for someone to find out what it is to read a book on it.
Read a book on it.
Yeah.
The books.
There's like many Scientology books.
Right.
Or there's a TV channel now called Scientology.tv.
But what is the God then? I mean, because we all got a God, we always have like a belief on something. Is there a God in Scientologist?
Not unless you want there to be. It would just be like, that's why you should read a book.
I just want to learn.
It doesn't deal, that's what I mean, you should read a book. Or,
well, I'm here now, there's no book. I mean, you're here.
Yeah, but it would be, it would be like this. If I really wanted to know what a Christian was,
I
what
can
they
tell you.
really believed,
Yeah.
I would read the Bible. I was raised Christian, so I would read the Bible.
Yeah, I was raised a Christian.
If I really
Yeah, I'm
wanted
a
to know what
Christian,
Muslim was, I'd read the Quran.
Right, but can you tell me about it?
No,
Come on, mate.
Why not?
because I've explained why. If you want to know what it is, you just find out what it is.
Read a book, find out for yourself. That is how Scientologists are instructed to answer the question, what is Scientology? Their website doesn't provide much explanation either. Developed by L. Ron Hubbard, Scientology is a religion that offers a precise path leading to a complete and certain understanding of one's true spiritual nature and one's relationship to self, family, groups, mankind, all life forms, the material universe, the spiritual universe, and the supreme being. Scientology addresses the spirit, not the body or the mind, and believes that man is far more than a product of his environment or his genes. I don't know about you, but that doesn't really tell me much about what they actually believe in. And that's the point. Scientology's whole recruitment process is designed to get you engrossed in Hubbard's writings and indoctrinated to believe that you are on a path to spiritual freedom. Nobody's telling you what to believe, you're finding out for yourself. One argument I hear quite frequently is, I'd never be so stupid so as to join a cult. The problem with that is it demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of how these groups actually work. Firstly, the vast majority of Scientologists are second or third generation, meaning they've been raised in it. It was not their choice. And they risk losing everything and everyone they've ever known if they dare to leave. And for those who join like I did, they do so out of desperation. Scientology uses a complex system of coercion, deceit, and manipulation designed to exploit people's vulnerabilities and offer hope and promise when a person is at their lowest. For me, I was struggling through a difficult time in my life. As a teenager, I moved around a lot. I went to 5 schools, and coupled with the sad loss of a number of friends, I was searching for meaning. What's the point? Why am I here? But my friend's life was cut short at the age of 14 after a brutal and aggressive battle with cancer. Why is there so much suffering in this world? And what's my purpose in life? After completing a personality test, I was told that I could do a life improvement course for just £30, and that would give me some tips and some tools that I could apply that might help me. If it doesn't work, so what? It's 30 quid. But if it does work, it could be life-changing. Desperate, sad, and hopeless, I was convinced it was worth at least giving it a shot. I'd heard a few things about Scientology going after its critics, Tom Cruise, and some wacky story about a space alien called Xenu. But from the get-go, my experience with Scientology was carefully crafted to ensure it was wildly different from what I've read about or seen in the media. Life Improvement course is just a book that you read, and it gives you some tools and an accompanying booklet with some questions that you answer to ensure that you've understood it and can really apply what you've learned in your life, I was told. If anyone tries to force you to disconnect from your family, or you feel like you're being coerced or mistreated, you can just walk out the door and never come back. And so began the cognitive dissonance. To begin with, at its introductory levels, Scientology kind of makes sense. Man is a spiritual being, you have a body and you have a mind, but you as a being operate on a spiritual level, and Scientology is trying to help you unlock your potential. Okay, I can get on board with that. Scientology breaks life down into 8 dynamics. The first dynamic is self, the second is family and relationships, the third is survival as a group, the fourth is mankind, and so on, right up to the 8th dynamic, which is God. But it stops short of telling you exactly what or who God is. Scientology isn't forcing you to believe anything. You're finding it out for yourself, see? Scientology calls its churches orgs, short for organisations. And everybody at London Org, where I joined, was young, around the same age as me. Friendly and enthusiastic about making the world a better place. I was 15 years old, and they saw the potential in me. and used gaslighting to make me feel like I was truly valued. And by studying these courses, I was taking real ownership of my life and equipping myself with the tools that would set me up for a great life ahead. And all of that was wildly different to what I'd seen in the media. But that's the point. Love bomb you and gaslight you just enough that your own personal experience casts doubt on what you'd heard outside and makes you think, maybe they've got it wrong. By the time I finished my GCSEs, I'd completed a couple of life improvement courses, and I hadn't seen anybody forced to do hard manual labour or people locked in rooms, but I had seen positive people trying to do right by the world. And I wanted to be part of something that I thought would make a difference. So I joined staff. What else was I going to do in my summer? The staff contract is either 2.5 or 5 years, and you agree to work in either the day org, Monday to Friday, 9 till 6, or foundation, which is evenings and weekends. It's a full-time position, and your contract says you're a religious volunteer, even though you've been given a job title, have obligations, and your payslips and HMRC documentation shows you're in fact an employee. I was paid an average of £20 per week, but I wasn't in it for the money. I had been helped by some of the things that I'd learned in these life improvement courses, and I truly felt like these things had potential to help others. So why wouldn't I want to help spread the word? I saw flashy ads like this one I'm about to show you, which only appeared to my aching desire to be accepted and to understand why so many of those around me were suffering from the tragic loss of their teenage friends.
You are not your name. You're not your job. You're not the clothes you wear or the neighborhood you live in. You're not your fears, your failures, or your past. You are hope. You are imagination. You are the power to change, to create, and to grow. You are a spirit that will never die. And no matter how beaten down, you will rise again. Scientology. Know yourself. Know life.
The story of Scientology began in 1950 with the publication of a book called Dianetics, The Modern Science of Mental Health, which was written by a failed science fiction writer called Lafayette Ronald Hubbard, who Scientologists often refer to by his initials, LRH. Despite having no qualifications or expertise in the field of science or mental health, Hubbard felt his book was a game changer, and indeed it took America by storm, selling 100,000 copies in the first 2 years after its publication. The book saw a revival in the 1980s after Scientology invested in a huge TV advertising campaign, which resulted in its being placed on the New York Times bestseller list. But the scientific community had a less than favourable view. In the January 1951 issue of Scientific American, nuclear physicist Isidore Isaac Rabi, a Nobel Prize winner who developed early radar systems that helped the Allies win the war, and who later became the godfather of the MRI, gave Dianetics the following review. This volume probably contains more promises and less evidence per page than has any publication since the invention of printing. Briefly, its thesis is that man is intrinsically good, has a perfect memory for every event in his life, and is a good deal more intelligent than he appears to be. However, something called the engram prevents these characteristics from being realized in man's behavior. During moments of unconsciousness and pain, and at any time from conception onward, the reactive mind can still record experience, but experiences so recorded, engrams, are a major source of man's misery. His psychosomatic ills, his neuroses and psychoses, his poor memory, and his generally inefficient functioning. By a process called Dianetic reverie, which resembles hypnosis and may apparently be practiced by anyone trained in Dianetics, these engrams may be recalled. Once thoroughly recalled, they are refiled, and the patient becomes clear, who is not handicapped by the encumbering engrams, and who thenceforth can function at a level of intellect, efficiency, and goodness seldom if ever realised before the history of man. The system is presented without qualification and without evidence. It has borrowed from psychoanalysis, Pavlovian conditioning, hypnosis, and folk beliefs, but except for the last, these depths are fulsomely denied. The huge sale of this book to date is distressing evidence of the frustrated ambitions, hopes, ideals, anxieties, and worries of the many persons who through it have sought succour. So, from the very beginning, we can see that Hubbard is exploiting people's traumas and vulnerabilities and selling false hope for the sake of personal gain. He captivated an audience, and off the back of a successful book launch, Hubbard proceeded to establish a career in the self-help field, writing a series of books and delivering lectures that now make up the core part of Scientology's belief system. He later developed the Bridge to Total Freedom, which looks a lot more complicated than it actually is. Essentially, it's a step-by-step guide to a better existence. On the left, we have training, which is a series of courses you can learn which you can do to learn how to deliver Scientology to other people. And on the right, we have processing, or auditing, which Scientology describes as spiritual counselling. Scientologists believe that by following precise steps in a specific order, you can attain total freedom and operate as what is known as an operating thetan, or OT. Thetan being Scientology's word for spiritual being. As an OT, you have unlocked innate godlike powers and abilities which we mere mortals have forgotten about due to a series of traumatic incidents over the course of mankind's existence. Each step on the Bridge to Total Freedom costs money, with each level costing more than the last. But this is spiritual freedom. Can't put a price on that, can you? The highest level is OT8, which is only delivered in one place on planet Earth, on board Scientology's cruise ship, the Freedoms, which sails around the Caribbean and is only accessible to the most dedicated Scientologists who have passed numerous background checks to ensure they're not going to leak the confidential materials. At OT3, Scientologists learn about Xenu, an alien overgalactic warlord who 75 billion years ago shipped a bunch of Thetans, spiritual beings, off to a planet called Tijiak, now known as Earth, and placed them in volcanoes before dropping H-bombs on them, turning Earth into a prison planet and causing immense collective trauma, which is what still haunts us all today as human beings. Hubbard was a science fiction writer after all, not a given points for creativity. All in, the Bridge to Total Freedom costs in excess of $1 million, and by the time you reach this level, you have endured hundreds, if not thousands of hours of indoctrination in the form of hypnotic auditing processes. And for many, even though it sounds absurd, there is a sunk cost fallacy which keeps you from walking out the door the moment you open these confidential materials that you've been eagerly awaiting and truly believe that give you the answers to life. But it is important to note, the vast majority of Scientologists don't even know these scriptures exist. The OT materials are considered highly confidential. And the belief is that if you're exposed to this information before you're ready, you will quite literally get pneumonia and die.
Right.
So it's for your own safety that you don't Google Scientology, and you make sure you follow Hubbard's carefully laid out program step by step. It is estimated that less than 5% of Scientologists ever make it to the OT levels. So for most people who are still in, when you tell them about Xenu, it just further solidifies their view that the media have got it all wrong, and that everybody else is bonkers, not them. I literally work for the church. I've read thousands of pages of Hubbard's writings, and I've never seen anything that even vaguely resembles Xenu or that space alien crap. That's what I would say when I was asked about it. If anything, it drove me to fight even harder for Scientology to be taken seriously. As a recruiter, it was my job to get people in. And one of the lies I would tell people is, people mistakenly think that we believe in LRH's science fiction materials, which he wrote before Dianetics in order to fund his research. I never reached OT3, so it wasn't until after I left that I realised I was lying, and that I had been lied to. And that's a common theme in Scientology. Selling books is considered vitally important for Scientology's expansion, and as Director of Public Book Sales, I had a pretty important job. In one of Hubbard's policy letters, he wrote that you have to invade someone's privacy in order to sell them a book. At London Law, we used to have a saying, crying is buying. If I can get you to cry, I've hit a nerve. I've found out what's really troubling you in life, which means it's then really easy for me to position Dianetics as the solution. You're buying that book. And I believed I was truly helping. Now I'm out, I realise that in fact, what I was doing was re-traumatising and emotionally manipulating strangers on the streets of London. And for that, I apologise. It's a horrible thing to do to a person, but that's not how Scientologists see it. They see it as a necessary evil in order to clear the planet and help mankind achieve greater states of existence. Scientology is, at its core, an extremist, totalitarian belief system. It's extremist because it teaches you that you have to follow Hubbard's policies word for word. There's no room for different interpretations. And it's totalitarian because it's positioned as the only solution to man's problems. In keeping Scientology working, which is one of the most important policy letters in the church, and it precedes every single course on the British Total Freedom, Hubbard says that Scientology will work 100% of the time, if applied 100% correctly. The only reason Scientology doesn't work is because it's not being delivered correctly. And this mindset is dangerous, because it conditions you to believe that Hubbard is an omniscient figure, and if you just do what he says, it will all be okay. That's not total freedom, it's total conformity. It's total control, and for many, total bankruptcy. But at the beginning, Scientology is presented as empowering. Let's take the concept of a Thetan as one example. If you are a spiritual being with more power, control, and ability than you could ever imagine, that sounds like a wonderful idea that might embolden you to take charge of your life and work towards a better existence. Great. But what that translates into is horrific treatment of victims of abuse. If, for example, as my friend Danielle Chamberlain was, you were raped as a teenager at Scientology's UK headquarters, you are not provided sympathy, care, or compassion. You are asked, what did you do to pull this in? Because as a spiritual being, you've done something to put yourself in the situation where you've allowed that to happen to yourself. If you're in a horrific car accident and end up in a wheelchair, or even you are born with a disability, you are considered in Scientology to be a degraded being. Because as a spiritual being, you've chosen a body that doesn't function as it should. And the only reason a Thetan would do that is if they've committed such horrific crimes in a past life that they've decided to punish themselves by making poor life choices. It's nothing short of disgusting. Abusive behaviour like this is baked into the very fabric of Scientology's being, and reports of people whose lives have been damaged by this so-called faith dates back almost to its beginning. In the 1970s, the government's inquiry into Scientology resulted in the Foster Report, which concluded that their practices amount to psychotherapy and should be regulated due to the harm it does to children. And in 1984, High Court Judge Lord Justice Leahy ruled that Scientology is both immoral and socially obnoxious. It is corrupt, sinister, and dangerous. It is corrupt because it is based on lies and deceit and has as its real objective power and money for Mr. Hubbard. It is sinister because it indulges in infamous practices, both to its adherents who do not toe the line unquestionably, and to those who criticise or oppose it. And it is dangerous because it is out to capture people, especially children and impressionable young people, and indoctrinate and brainwash them so they become the unquestioning captives and tools of the cult, withdrawn from ordinary thought, living, and relationships with others. In 1999, Scientology were rejected charity status by the Charity Commission after it ruled Scientology does not benefit the public. But none of this has resulted in any meaningful change. In 2013, the UK Supreme Court designated churches of Scientology as places of worship for the purposes of religious wedding ceremonies. And after a subsequent 10-year legal battle with HMRC, in 2023, a specialist valuations tribunal ruled that they should therefore be exempt from business rates, which means, despite not having charity status, the British taxpayer is footing the bill for Scientology's abusive practices. And yes, that should make you angry. In October 2005, Scientology's UK Managing Director, Janet LeVeaux, featured on Richard and Judy to confront allegations of abuse within Scientology. Here's what she had to say.
Right, followers of the Church of Scientology include Tom Cruise and his fiancée Katie Holmes. There's John Travolta, of course, Kirstie Alley and Lisa Marie Presley. But there are persistent reports that for the humbler Scientologists, life in the sect, some call it a cult, the people who are there don't call it either, can be rather unpleasant, even frightening. Its founder, sci-fi pulp writer L. Ron Hubbard, reportedly said this at a writers' convention in 1948. Creating a new religion would be the best way to make money. Well, 5 years later, he founded the Church of Scientology, preaching that humans are infested with the spirits of Thetans, spelt T-H-E-T-A-N-S, Thetans, an alien race who arrived on Earth at some point in the past, some say 75,000 years ago. Astra Woodcraft says that her years with Scientology turned into a nightmare, something that Reverend Janet Kenyon from the Church of Scientology simply will not accept. But let's hear your story first. How long were you in the Scientologists for?
From when I was born until I left when I was 19.
And you say that it was you found it a completely controlling organisation.
Absolutely.
Everything that you did, said, thought
Yes.
fell into their control.
Yes, very much control.
Could you give us some examples of that?
Well, when I was working there, all our mail was opened and copied.
Mm-hmm.
All phone calls if we were to make a phone call to someone outside of the church, it was to be recorded or listened in on by their security personnel. We basically worked there, lived there, ate there. We weren't allowed to leave the building without permission.
You married when you were only 15, didn't you?
A month after my 15th birthday.
Is that was encouraged, obviously?
Basically ordered.
Yeah.
Yes.
We can't go into detail at this time of night, too much detail, but is it, you've said that, and this, you weren't alone in this, that when you were 15 years old, the Church of Scientology encouraged you to give very specific and explicit sexual advice to middle-aged men.
Yes, at that time I held the job of it was called an ethics officer, and any kind of sexual conduct that was considered unacceptable, they would be sent to me to be handled, basically, to be set straight.
Can you tell us what contact assisting was?
A contact assist is if you get hurt, they believe that by repeating the action that caused the injury over and over and over, say you hit your arm on the table, so you'd redo it, you'd hit your arm on the table lightly, not to cause pain over and over and over, and by doing that, that's supposed to make the pain go away.
Instead of putting a plaster on it or...
Yeah.
Right, well, you do that later or beforehand.
Let me come to Janet. You've heard what Astra said. Specifically at 15, she was encouraged to marry. At the same age, she was encouraged to give sexual counselling to men who are older than herself. Does that happen in your experience?
Well, Astral is the first person I've met that married at the age of 15. You know, the experience that Astral is describing is just not my personal experience at all. I've been a member of the IC organization for over 30 years now.
That's the same organization you were a member
Yes.
of, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a religious order within the church. And as I said, I've been a member for over 30 years. I've traveled around the world. I've been in Los Angeles. I raised my children in the C organization. And Astral is the first one that I've met who was married at the age of 15.
I have to say, though, you've been with the church for how many years, did you say 30?
33 years,
33, and I've been a journalist for roughly the same length of time, okay? And I've interviewed, maybe a dozen people like her, who've either been born into Scientology or have been brought into it, and have come out with very similar stories of control, stories of being very frightened, stories of not having much free will at all, and sometimes even of abuse. So, She may be the first person you've met who tells stories like that. I can promise you, journalistically, she's one of many that I've met, and there have been many more that I haven't met but have read interviews with. It does seem to have a problem, doesn't it, Scientology, with ex-members who leave quoting stories very similar to this.
Well, you know, the subject of a religious apostasy is littered throughout history. It's not something that is new. You have different people who have different experiences. You have human beings within a religion, within any organization, and one can't account for every experience that every individual has.
That's not my experience. I've never seen anything like that. Those are bold-faced lies. On the screen now is a letter that Janet sent last year to the head teacher of a school where a friend of mine, Austin Waite, worked, asking for him to be sacked as a result of his participation in a protest against Scientology's abuses, which she describes as anti-religious hate speech. Janet is not only aware of the abuse within the Scientology organisation, she is the one, or one of the people, handing it out. This is an example of what Scientology refers to as fair game, its practice of going after critics that resulted in the hate website you saw at the beginning of my talk. If you dare to speak out about Scientology, you're branded by the church as a suppressive person, or SP for short. And here's what Hubbard wrote about how to handle such people. A truly suppressive person or group has no rights of any kind, and actions taken against them are not punishable. And by that he means within Scientology's internal system of ethics. And for speaking out, SP order, fair game, may be deprived of property or injured by any means by any Scientologist without any discipline of the Scientologist, may be tricked, sued, lied to, or destroyed. L. Hubbard. These are the policies that dictate how Scientology handles people like me and Austin. And are the precise reason why speaking out is so vitally important. In March, The Observer, the world's oldest Sunday newspaper, published a double-page expose on how the Church of Scientology have been engaging in a prolific campaign of targeted harassment against me and Austin as a result of organising a protest outside their UK headquarters. That campaign has seen Scientology weaponise the internet, and over the last few months alone, I have received over 10,000 attack tweets. A hate website has been put up, my family and business connections have received letters, and my front door has been kicked in. Indeed, Scientology even tried to get this talk cancelled. Only yesterday, I received an email from Amar explaining how a number of Leicester Secular Society workers had gotten calls from Janet's colleague, Graham Wilson, attempting to discredit me as a source and smear my name. Although fair game is something you can expect when you speak out against Scientology, it's not something I believe should be tolerated. And I'm the sort of person who stands up to bullies. So I'm afraid to say to any Scientologists here tonight or watching online, your plan is not working. I'd also like to thank Leicester Secular Society for braving Scientology's threats and not caving in to the pressure. It can be daunting to receive these worrying phone calls like that, and it's a testament to your society that despite the backlash, you've welcomed me with open arms and I'm able to stand here before you today. Janet and Graham are members of the Office of Special Affairs, or OSA for short. It's been described as Scientology's attack wing, and its responsibilities include protecting Scientology's public image, or what's left of it, legal affairs, front groups, and the destruction of suppressive people through fair game. OSA also functions as Scientology's own intelligence agency, and its predecessor, known as the Guardian's Office, was responsible for the Snow White Project, the largest infiltration of the US government in its history. Yes, that's right. In the 1970s, Scientology sent an estimated 5,000 undercover agents to secure jobs in various government agencies and steal documents, which resulted in 11 executives, including L. Ron Hubbard's own wife, Mary Sue, going to prison. The Snow White Project was orchestrated by executives out of Scientology's UK headquarters known as St. Hill Manor, and was only discovered after the FBI raided various church properties over in the US. St Hill is nestled, as you can see, in the beautiful Sussex countryside, halfway between London and Brighton, near a town called East Grinstead, and is home to the annual gathering of the International Association of Scientologists, the IAS, which is the largest fundraising event in Scientology's calendar globally, in which thousands of parishioners travel from across Europe to hear the reclusive leader David Miscavige speak about their latest developments and so-called expansion. Historically, the event has been attended by local dignitaries, and in 2023 a photograph emerged of the East Grinstead town mayor standing on stage of the event accepting a £50,000 cheque for his charity. As I'm sure you can imagine, I wasn't best pleased about this idea, so I took myself along to an East Grinstead Town Council meeting to ask why the mayor thought it was appropriate to take money from what I consider to be a human trafficking, child abusing cult. In response, I was asked to refrain from speaking about it on social media and issued a letter from the council describing me as a vexatious bully. I then did some digging and found out that a number of town councillors currently feature in Scientology's propaganda films promoting their close relationship that they have with each other. Here's one example.
I've been involved with St Hill and I've been up here quite often. I've learned what Scientology do. This pandemic, it's been quite devastating for our communities. And St Hill have been out there sanitising our play parks, sanitising some of our buildings, making our community safe. It's absolutely marvellous what they do and are very much part of this community. So that just goes to show exactly what St Hill is all about, what Scientology is about. It's open to everyone, and I think that's testament to yourselves and the amount of general public that flock up to St Hill when you have events. The Easter egg hunt, the summertime swing, the charities. So it's those sort of things that you do, not just for this community, but for other communities as well. We are so very lucky to have you, and I'll support you 100%. What you do, the things you do to make the world a better place. And you are truly amazing people, and I've made so many friends up here, so thank you.
You may think, so what? They're sanitising playgrounds and council offices, offering to help people during the pandemic isn't a crime. But it's important to look at Scientology's intent in doing so. It's not because they genuinely care about the local community, but because they want to win over local officials and distract public attention away from its dirty tricks, harassment, and the abuse that goes on behind closed doors at St Hill. And don't just take my word for it, let's look at some quotes from Scientology policy letters. No government bum ever acts on his own initiative. Governments today are simply like prostitutes, they are used. L. Ron Hubbard. A nation or state runs on the ability of its department heads, its governors, or any other leaders. It is easy to get posts in such areas, unless one has delusions of grandeur or fear of it. Don't bother to get elected. Get a job on the secretarial staff or the bodyguard. Use any talent one has to get a place close in and go to work. The objective of the department is to broaden the impact of Scientology upon governments and other organisations, and is to conduct itself so as to make the name and the repute of Scientology better and more forceful. Therefore, defensive tactics are frowned upon in the department. We are not trying to make the central orgs and HCOs be good, HCO meaning Hubbard Communication Office. We are trying to make their reach more secure and effective. Only attacks resolve threats. And finally, the goal of the department is to bring government and hostile philosophies or societies into a state of complete compliance with the goals of Scientology. This is done by high-level ability to control, and in its absence, a low-level ability to overwhelm. Introvert such agencies, control such agencies. And so, my issue isn't with Scientology donating £50,000 to a local charity or cleaning the local playground during the pandemic. It's with the close relationship that it has established with local officials by doing so. Under the guise of community work, Scientology have managed to infiltrate and manipulate local officials to the point of censoring the public record whenever a question about Scientology is asked at a local council meeting.
My name is Stephen Jones. I live in East Grinstead. So this does relate to item 6, disposing of outstanding business, because it has been raised before. So my question is, would the mayor consider meeting with myself so that we could discuss and explain our position and why we are opposed to that organisation?
I won't answer that question, but I will get back to you. That's okay, Mr. Jones. Have you got contact details for the town clerk?
I can certainly provide them.
That's fine, if you don't mind, I'll do that.
Yes, thank you very much.
Anybody else have any questions? Let's, Mr. Wade, would you have any questions?
So, I'd just like to ask, given concerns raised...
You get the point. That was a recording from the East Grinstead Town Council meeting earlier this year. One of the claims Scientology makes about me is that I'm a serial stalker of women, and references this council meeting as an example of such behaviour. On their hate website, and in every statement it has sent to journalists interested in covering my activism, Scientology have said, at a public meeting in January 2025, he moved in on his new victim, sitting too close for comfort. He snapped a selfie with her, drew a heart around the picture, and then posted it on social media, boasting how stalking her was the highlight of my evening, highlight of my year. In actual fact, this female Scientologist was Janet Laveau, a public figure and the managing director of the Church of Scientology UK. Janet doesn't normally attend East Grinstead Town Council meetings, and only did so because they had been given advance warning that I was planning to ask a question. When I arrived, I sat on the opposite side of the room to Janet, and it was only when the leader of the council asked me to move seats, pointing at the chair next to Janet, that I moved. After the meeting, I uploaded a video to my YouTube channel with this thumbnail. I made light of the situation, saying that sitting next to the person responsible for my currently ongoing campaign of harassment was the highlight of my year. I was, of course, joking. Nonetheless, it hasn't stopped Scientology from twisting and manipulating the event to fit their narrative that I am a dangerous, discreditable, and bitter apostate, desperate to destroy their so-called religion. Another claim Scientology makes about me is that I was dismissed from staff after stalking a female colleague. I was a teenager when I was on staff, and the first time I'd heard any such claim was when it appeared on my hate website, 10 years after I'd left. And here is my staff dismissal notice, which makes it clear I was kicked out for complaining Scientology doesn't work. Nothing to do with any females or any stalking. I don't think they realised I might still have this document. Last year, ahead of our protest at the gates of St Hill during the IES weekend, Scientology filed for a public spaces protection order, which would essentially ban protesting, citing hate speech, discrimination, and antisocial behaviour. The police were present at both of these events, and at this year and the previous protest, and no arrests, warnings, or cautions were made, and we continue to lead our activism with both kindness and compassion. I don't know how clear these signs are for you, but they say things like, when was the last time you saw your family? They love you, and so do we. It's not out ethics to put your mental health first. And who is really at cause over your life? You or Scientology? The process is still ongoing, and Mid-Sussex District Council are currently reviewing all the evidence gathered before putting it to elected members for a vote in the summer. But a ban on protesting represents a direct threat to our freedom of speech and right and to peaceful assembly, and it's something we are taking extremely seriously. Earlier, I mentioned that staff members sign either 2.5 or 5-year contracts and work Monday to Friday 9 till 6 or evenings and weekends. But what we haven't discussed yet is what the Scientology calls the C organisation. In the late 1960s, after the UK government cancelled L. Ron Hubbard's visa and the French government charged him with fraud in absentia, he headed for the high seas aboard his ship called the Apollo, from which he could run the church's operations in international waters out of the reach of those who were after him. Those who staffed the ship, mostly young females, some as young as 12, formed what is today called the Sea Org, a paramilitary group of elite Scientologists who have signed $1 billion-year contracts dedicating not just this life, but all future lives to working for the church. These people are the most dedicated parishioners and are provided communal birthing, food, and a weekly stipend of just £50 in return for a lifetime of service. They work 14, 16, often 18-hour days, 7 days a week, with no time off, are expected to continue doing so until they die. There is no retirement plan, no holidays, no pension, and every aspect of your life is tightly controlled by the church. Before I left, I signed one of these contracts and was on a path to move to Scientology's headquarters in Clearwater, Florida as a teenager, and I fully believed that every day, whatever job I would be doing, I'd be helping to bring about a saner, more peaceful world. However, what they don't tell you when you sign up is what life in the Sea Org is actually like. Sea Org staff serve in the highest levels of Scientology's management, and all of the staff at its UK headquarters, including Janet and Graham, are members of the Sea Org. With the exception of a handful of public-facing executives, for the most part, Sea Org members are forbidden from owning a mobile phone, and their contact with the outside world is extremely limited. Leaving the base requires prior approval first, and you certainly won't be allowed out alone in case you escape. Access to the internet is censored, and if you get pregnant, you're forced to have an abortion because it's seen as a distraction from your mission and commitment to life in the Sea Org. If you leave, you have nothing to fall back on because it would mean disconnecting from your friends, your family, and your only source of support, the church. Punishments in the Sea Org are severe, with many reporting that physical beatings, hard manual labour, and interrogations were commonplace at every Sea Org base across the globe, including here in the United Kingdom. The properties themselves are often isolated. St Hill, for example, is down a dark country lane, its only neighbours being the rugby pub and leisure centre, both of which have received £50,000 donations from Scientology on multiple occasions in the past. The prospects for a Sea Org member who wishes to leave are grim, and that's why it's important organisations like the Michael J. Rinder Aftermath Foundation exist to help people land on their feet. In January, Scientology ads started to pop up on the London Underground, and I partnered with the Aftermath Foundation to devise a counter-campaign. Our billboards went up in exactly the same spots as Scientology's at one of London's busiest tube stations, and are expected to reach an average of 1.8 million people every single week that they're up. Scientology really didn't like that. They are trying hard, using the full weight of their billion-dollar slush fund and reputation for litigation and bully tactics to intimidate us into silence. And yes, it can be scary, but somebody needs to stand up to these guys, and something needs to be done about the systemic issue of abuse in this organisation. So what can be done about it? Well, under the Serious Crime Act 2015, coercive control became a criminal offence. However, the statutory guidance issued at the time means it can only be applied to domestic partnerships. Together with the Family Survival Trust, I've been campaigning for government to review this legislation and broaden its scope so that it can be applied to the relationship one might have with a religious leader, co-worker or teacher. But for this to happen, we need the support of MPs across the political spectrum. And so I ask, if you do one thing after this talk, you drop me an email to your local MP asking them to support our proposed amendment to legislation. And if you don't, at the very least, I ask that you continue this conversation with people in your network. Scientology isn't just a crazy American cult, it's a dangerous organisation that is abusing people right here in the UK. You don't have to be stupid to join a cult, you just have to be vulnerable.
Scientology's got to go! Hip, hip, cheerio! Scientology's got to go! The abuse has to stop! The abuse has to stop!
Men stämningen är god, de håller modet uppe de här demonstranterna. De har marscherat tidigare idag så de får ställa sig.
Hip, hip, cheerio! Scientology's got to go! Hip, hip, cheerio! Hip, hip, cheerio! The abuse has to stop!
The one pushing him into the road, mate.
Can he be gotten off our property?
The abuse has to stop! The abuse has to stop!
This is not touch me. Please don't. Do not. I have a right to touch you on the property. Do not. I'm not on the property.
The abuse has to stop! The abuse has to stop!
There is human trafficking occurring on that property at St. Hill at this very moment, and it will continue until government agencies step in to stop it. Sea Organization, members of Scientology, are victims of human trafficking. They are being held in circumstances where they are cut off from the outside world. These people are right there at St. Hill right now.
Thank you very much.